Thank you, Brittany. We look forward to your leadership for the rest of 2020, and hopefully you take on another service of duty, tour of duty, if you will. With that, I'd like to present our first speaker. He's external. He's at Walk West in Raleigh. A lot of his initiatives is focused on innovation, transformation, diversity and inclusion. I had a chance to meet Kurt because he read one of my articles on Above the Law, connected with me on LinkedIn. We both realized we were both in the triangle, had a cup of coffee before COVID-19 pandemic, and we are so excited to host him, to hear his speech, and I think it will have tremendous impact in the organization. So without further ado, here is Kurt.
Thank you for the round of applause in the room here. My name is Kurt Merriweather, as Ty just mentioned, and I'm going to take you through a little bit about my journey. And it was not planned as well as it probably could have been. Life gets in the way sometimes when you have a plan, and so I want to talk a little bit about this. When we're in this moment right now with what we're facing, now is the time to refuel and retool. And so we're going to be spending a lot of time kind of being introspective right now, and this is a good time to do that. So I want to pose a question as we get into this around, what do you want to do with your career? That's the fundamental question you have to answer. No one else can answer that for you. And so this is a time for us to begin to do that. So I'm going to show you a little bit about my journey and then dive into some things that I hope will be helpful as you're thinking about your own career. So I am not a native North Carolinian. I'm from Ohio. I went to The Ohio State University and majored in electrical engineering. And so at that point, I thought that I wanted to build technology. So I worked at Procter & Gamble in my first job out of school. I was working in technology and realized that I didn't want to do that. And really fell in love with business, so decided to go to Stanford for business school. And really then decided that I not only wanted to build technology, I wanted to build technology products. And so had some opportunities in Silicon Valley to work for a few different companies that you probably haven't heard of. They were startups, and they have places that are now where Google's campus happens to be in Silicon Valley. So decided to move to the East Coast to be closer to my family. And at that point, I wanted to learn how to build companies. So I went from building technology to building products to building companies. And so I worked for AOL, I worked for Discovery Communications, which is the parent company of Discovery Channel, TLC, Food Network, Home and Garden TV now. And was able to do some great things there. I was able to be part of the largest transaction that we had when we acquired a company. We were able to spin out an organization called Curiosity.com that was part of an incubator. I was able to get a patent as a result of that, and then moved here to this area and worked for Reverb Nation, which is one of the largest independent music companies or communities. And now I work for Walk West, which is a growing marketing firm. And so I've gone from building technology to building products to building businesses to building teams. Because ultimately you can't do anything great unless you learn how to build a team. And so that's one of the things that's my mission, is to help people build great teams. So the fundamental question that we all need to answer for ourselves is, what do you hope to gain in your career? And so there's three things that people say after having conversations with people, looking at a little research about, especially emerging professionals, whether you're millennials or Gen Z. These are the three things. And the interesting thing that I didn't see was money. So money may be on your list, but it doesn't seem to be on the top three for most people as they're thinking about what drives them and what satisfies them. So there are three things: the desire to have an impact, the desire to be challenged, and lastly, the opportunity to grow and develop as part of an organization. And so when we think about these three things, the other thing to know is that there are three things that companies are looking for, and they don't necessarily line up. So how are you saving me money? How are you making me money? And how are you helping me move my organization forward? So it's important as we think about our careers in organizations, how do we align ourselves to make sure that we get what we need while we're delivering what the company expects from us? And if there's alignment between those things, then you're in a good place. But a lot of times there isn't an alignment, and so what are we going to do as employees to make sure that we're aligning ourselves, understanding that the scorecard the company is keeping is these three things: making money, saving money, and moving the organization forward. So the thing that we need to do is to build a roadmap for ourselves. I have conversations with a lot of folks within our own organization that want a career path, they want a career ladder. And a lot of times that expectation doesn't exist. And in the minds of companies. The reason for that is we're living in dynamic times that are changing. With COVID-19, people's career ladders changed overnight. And so there are no guarantees other than the ability to build your own skill set. And so the thing that I think about, and this is emblematic of what I've done in my career, is thinking about starting as an individual contributor. A lot of times when we start an organization, we're thinking about building functional excellence. So if I do what my manager says, then I'm going to get promoted. At a certain point, that stops working. Because at some point, you have to shift so that you're leading an organization. You're telling the management team what to do. Because they're looking for great people to do that. That's one of the quotes that is attributed to Steve Jobs. We hire great people so that they tell us what to do, not that we tell them what to do. And so that's the expectation for a lot of organizations. So in order to make this transition from an individual contributor who's functionally excellent that does what their management team is telling them to a people leader who crafts strategy for teams, there's some skills that need to be developed to make that happen. And that's not something the organization is necessarily going to help you with. These are things that we as individuals have to be able to do for ourselves. And it requires courageous introspection. So a lot of times we don't want to deal with where we are in terms of deficiencies or things that we need to work on or improve. And that requires courage to be able to say, I'm not good at this. I don't know how to do this. How am I going to get to be able to do that? And so that requires not only introspection, but getting input from other people as we do that, as we're thinking about that. The other thing is to be courageous in what we want to do. So a lot of us think too small. What are we doing to enlarge what we want to do in terms of our impact that we want to have? How do we create dreams that are almost impossible to reach so that we can think about what we're going to do to make sure that we can reach them? So that's the one thing that I challenge a lot of people that I work with, is to think big, but also have an honest assessment of where you really stand and work with other people to do that. So how do we get to this point where we are able to have this assessment? So what I'll talk about on the right-hand side of this slide here is steps to building your roadmap. And this is counterintuitive. A lot of people will degree themselves, if that's really a word. So they'll continue to get academic accolades, they'll get certificates, they'll get certifications, they'll do all these things. And the path to being successful in an organization, that only represents about 10% of what you need, is formal education. A lot of people spend more time in formal education than they do on other things. The keys to building success in your career are really thinking about how to craft and curate your professional experiences and to make sure that you've got the right kinds of social interactions. It's the interactions that we have with each other are the things that drive us forward to be excellent. That's the thing that we need to think about a little bit differently. We need to make sure that we're surrounding ourselves with the right people. That's not just within the organization, that's actually outside the organization as well. And then making sure that we've got the right experiences. So I'm going to start with this idea of building your personal board of advisors. So when we think about who we want to be, we shouldn't be limited to our teams, we shouldn't be limited to our companies. We should be looking at the best people in the industry that we want to be in and figure out how we can get to them. How are we going to be, whether it's an email, whether it's phone calls, whether it's networking, how are we getting to the best people in our professions and spending time understanding how they think and how they got to where they are? One of the things that I had an opportunity to hear LeBron James' agent Maverick Carter talk about how he got to where he is. And he said he would find people who were the best at what they did in new industries and just call them and just talk to them. Because what we find is that people love to talk about themselves and their success. And so if we're able to get somebody to talk about how successful they've been and how they got there, they love to mentor people who are hungry that want to know that same thing. So what are we doing to make sure that we're surrounding ourselves with the right kinds of people so that they can give us what we need to grow? So that's the first thing. Think about yourself as a company and assemble your board of advisors. The second thing is to make sure that we're having the right functional experiences. Make sure that you're doing things that are going to translate into business outcomes so that you can say at the end of what you've done, I did this, here's what happened. And a lot of times we get stuck in roles where we don't necessarily have that output. Find a way to make sure you're working on projects and other things that create a concrete outcome that other people are going to say, yes, you did that, I understand that, you are progressing. The last thing is making sure that there are leadership opportunities that we're pursuing wherever we can, whether it's within our organizations. It could be organizations like GlobalNet, it could be organizations outside of the company, where we're building skills, where you're building something from scratch. You're working on a team that might have different constituents, different stakeholders that don't necessarily think or look like you. How do you get that team to be cohesive and to achieve a mission that you have? Being able to have those kinds of experiences are really important because they translate to almost anything that you do in terms of leading a business or an organization. So the questions that we need to ask ourselves, when it's quiet, are things like, what value am I adding when I show up at a meeting, when I show up to a project, when I show up to an initiative, so that the people around me are made better because of it, whether they're my colleagues, it could be my clients or my customers, it could be the company overall. How am I adding unique value and how are they experiencing that? If I wasn't in the room, how would things be different? That's the thing that we need to answer for ourselves as we're trying to grow. And then the other thing that we should ask is, what are we willing to sacrifice to achieve it? Because the reality is, if we want to achieve something that's difficult, we're going to have to sacrifice something. So that could be time, it could be money, because we might choose to do something to build skills to put us in a situation where we don't earn as much. What are we willing to give up? It could be spending time with family members. It could be the vision I had for myself when I graduated from college. Now where I am is different. Am I willing to let things go in order to achieve what I want to do next? Those are questions we need to ask about ourselves, and also confront the things that stop us from doing what we need to do to be excellent. A lot of us are afraid of failing or being embarrassed or doing other things. If you want something, you have to be able to be great at making sure that you understand how to prioritize your time to do those things well. And so one of the things that makes a person great inside of an organization is the ability to lead a team but made up of different kinds of people. And so I want to talk a little bit about what we're doing at Walk West to this end. So one of the things that we're doing is we're working with organizations that have a passion for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we're helping them make the transition from thinking about that as creating safe spaces to creating innovative ideas and translating that into business value. So we're working with organizations to help them realize the productivity and the profitability that comes with having a diverse leadership team or a diverse team itself. And so I welcome anybody who's interested to, I'll have my contact information at the end of this, to reach out to us. We have a complimentary beta program where we're trialing an online course, and we'd love to have folks that are part of GlobalNet participate if that's something that you're interested in. If you want to connect with me and we can continue this conversation further, or you can read some of the things that I talk about on LinkedIn, follow me on LinkedIn, Twitter, or email me at WalkWest. So thank you again for the opportunity to be before you today on Ty's last day. So I appreciate what we've been able to achieve just in 3 weeks. So Ty and I have had a short relationship, but it's been very impactful. So thanks again for having me, and look forward to continuing the relationship.
Gotta get used to the no handshake.
The head nod.
Yes, the head nod. Like I mentioned, had the opportunity to meet Kurt through LinkedIn, through an article he read that I wrote about diversity, inclusion, and equity. It's something that I'm super passionate about. It's my labor of love. And for the last day, I thought, who better than to feature than a coworker, a colleague, Nikia Wilkinson. I call her Nikki. She goes by Nikki, I'm sure by most. Her friends call her Nikki. I've gotten to work with her on a number of projects. She's Blue Cross North Carolina's assistant counsel on the legal team. If you haven't had the opportunity to meet her, she had a recent health scare, and for a couple weeks, several weeks, she was away. So my partner in arms was away, and I was kind of lost without her and her legal advice. And I just thought it was great to talk about that, to put a spotlight on that, to talk about healthcare disparities, to talk about social drivers of health, social determinants of health, non-medical drivers of health. And with that, I don't want to steal her spotlight, so I'll let her take it from here.
everyone. Again, Ty, thank you so much for the invitation to speak about